Hey people, Duncan here. Let's talk NBA playoffs. Okay, first stop. Let's go round one versus eight. In the West, we have Houston versus Minnesota, and in the East, we have Toronto versus Washington. So here's how I see things going down with these two series. One, Minnesota's a good team. I can see them pushing Houston at least once in this series. I think Houston overall wins the series 4-1. Chris Paul gets into the second round. James Harden, Houston's offense is just so much to deal with. I just don't see Minnesota keeping up. And their defense isn't as good as it should be with Thibodeau as the head coach. So I can see Houston advancing in that series 4-1. And on the other side, in the East, I see Toronto and Washington. Toronto is one of the best defensive teams in the league. They've lost so many game ones. It's not funny. I think they're the team to overall beat, and I really don't see Washington keeping up with them. But I think it'll be a little bit better of a series than in the West, and I do see Washington pulling two games out of nowhere on them. Especially with John Wall coming back, so that's one thing. And so I can see Toronto advancing 4-2. Now, for the second seed, we got the 2 versus 7. In the West is Golden State versus the Spurs. In the East, we have Boston versus the Bucks. Okay, Golden State's without Curry, the Spurs without Leonard. To me, this is going to be one of the most boring back and forth series as you can imagine. I think Kevin Durant still gives Golden State enough to win, but I don't think he's happy, and I think the coaching staff and these players are starting to feel the burden on each other. I think they're getting itchy at each other. I can see Golden State pulling off a 4-2 win. And in the East, Boston versus the Bucks, I see Boston actually pulling this off because I don't see Milwaukee being a good enough team. They're a decent team, but Boston is the second overall for a reason. Even without Kyrie Irving, Boston should at least be able to pull out a Game 7, 4-3 victory in this series. So, in the 3rd versus 6th in the West, we have the Blazers versus the Pelicans. And in the East, we have the 76ers versus the Heat. To me, these are going to be the two most exciting series that you can see. These guys, they're young, they're exciting. All four of these teams can win. Okay, the Blazers are a young team, but to be honest, the Pelicans, I just don't see the Blazers matching up with them, specifically Anthony Davis. I think Anthony Davis alone carries the Pelicans to a Game 7 victory. Pelicans will win that series 4-3 despite Portland having home court. And in the East, the 76ers and the Heat. The 76ers are a young, aggressive team. And if Embiid comes back, let me tell you, 76ers, I think, are going to roll over the Heat. Now, I understand the Heat are a pretty good team, but I actually have this series, the 76ers winning this series 4-2, and the only reason there's 2 wins for the Heat is simply because of nerves. The 76ers are young. None of their players have really been in the playoffs, so it'll be a learning experience as they go. So for that regard, I'm giving Miami 2 wins in the series, but I see 76ers winning 4-2. Now, in the 4 and 5, I got OKC versus the Jazz in the West, and we got Cavs versus Pacers in the East. Now, OKC is, I don't know if they're really a great team. They sometimes play good together, but they've fallen so deep in the holes and had to climb their way out. The problem with it is they're facing the Jazz, which are by far the hottest team since the All-Star break. And when you're going into the playoffs with that kind of steam, you become a very dangerous team. And I don't think Utah fears OKC. I think Utah comes out and I think they wipe OKC off the map. I think it's 4-1. Utah dominates Oklahoma City, and Paul George opts out and comes to LA during the offseason. Now, in the East, I got Cavs versus Pacers. Now, Pacers are a good team, but really they're a one-player team. And they're facing the best player in all of basketball, LeBron James. LeBron's going to find a way to win this series. He's not going to lose in the first round. The Cavs have some good key parts around them. I can see Cleveland pulling this off 4-2, pretty simple. Now, with that being said, now we're talking round 2. We have the number 1 in the West. We have Houston versus the Pelicans. And in the East, we got Toronto versus the Cavs. Okay, so Houston, I believe, is still a very aggressive young team that can score. Well, not really young, but they can score. They've got several different stars on that team, a lot of potential for greatness on that team. The Pelicans have Anthony Davis, but honestly, I feel as if Golden State is going to get pushed by the Pelicans simply because they run such a fast tempo. So you got a team in New Orleans that can keep the same pace as Houston, but they add a better defense. The question is, can they continue it on a 7-game series? To me, I see Houston winning 4-3, but I think Houston gets really dragged out in this series. And then on the other side, you got Toronto versus Cleveland. Cleveland is a good young team, but they have players that are inexperienced in the playoff, in Clarkson and Nance. They got guys that really you don't know how it's going to happen in the second round. You don't know what's going to happen. They're going to end up tending to rely a lot on LeBron. And they're going up against one of the best defenses in the NBA, a team that is bent on beating LeBron James in the playoffs, and a team that is really set on this year being theirs. I see Toronto beating Cleveland 4-2, and LeBron James opts out of Cleveland and moves on potentially to Philadelphia. So next we have the number 2 Golden State Warriors versus the number 5 Utah Jazz. And on the other side we have the number 2 Boston Celtics versus the number 3 76ers. Okay, now to me, this is a lopsided event. The Jazz are the hottest team in basketball once again. The Warriors are crippled. They're old, they're broken, they're tired. I don't see them going very far in this one. So I can see Utah blowing the doors off of Golden State in every one of their wins. But Golden State will find a way to claw and scratch together enough wins to turn this into a 7-game series. But when it comes down to it, and you got one of the best defensive players in the paint, and you got one of the hottest young teams that are going to fight tooth and nail, I see Utah beating the defending champs 4-3, Game 7, last-minute heroics. Utah Jazz advance to the Western Conference semifinals against the Houston Rockets. And in the East, I see Toronto. I see Boston versus 76ers. Boston, that's another team that's not the same team as it is without Kyrie. They limped through the first round against the subpar Bucks team, But now they're facing a real team, a young team, a hungry team, an aggressive team, a team that sees a future, that sees a door to a championship right there in front of them. I believe the 76ers come out and they beat Boston simply because Boston can't keep up. I see it 4-1, 76ers advance. And now what we're looking at is in the Western Conference Finals, Houston versus the Jazz, and in the East we have Toronto versus the 76ers. Houston does not play defense. They're going to want to run. But the Jazz have one of the best defenders in the game with Rudy Gobert. The Jazz are a hot team that can push Houston. I see the Jazz winning another 7-game series, clawing their way to the NBA Finals, 4-3. I see them beating the number 1 seed Houston Rockets and the hottest team in basketball since the All-Star break. The Utah Jazz are representing the West in the NBA Finals. And in the East, the 76ers are a great team. They're young, they're aggressive, they're going to stretch this game. This series is going to go 7. The problem is, in Game 7, they're going up against the number 1 seed Toronto Raptors, the number 1 defense in Toronto. They're going up against a team that finally sees a chance at an NBA championship right in front of them. And Toronto will stomp the 76ers in Game 7, and we will look at an NBA championship between the Utah Jazz and the Toronto Raptors. The Jazz, a phenomenal young team, one of the best teams since the All-Star break, but you can't stop destiny. The Toronto Raptors have been doing it all year. They've proven to be a dynamic team bent on defense. They can get scoring from Lowry. They can get scoring from DeRozan. And they will become the 2018 NBA champions, the Toronto Raptors. And that is my Mad Sports Talk, NBA playoffs. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please comment in the box below. Hit that bell for notifications. Like my channel, subscribe to my channel, and come find me on other social media sites. I'm all over the place. Peace. Duncan out.